Operation Guardian. Today we're doing an analysis of a system that was designed to protect, and we're going to look at what happens when that exact system turns against you. This is a story about a system that makes a promise to protect the vulnerable. But it's also a story about what happens when that very system decides that you are not the person to be protected, but the problem that needs to be removed. So to really get what went wrong here, we have to start with the promise. We need to look at the official story, the way these multi-agency operations are sold to the public. So what is Operation Guardian exactly? Well, it's a partnership. In this case, it was between Surrey Police, a housing association called MTVH, and the local Runnymede Council. The idea, on paper, is for them to share information, spot vulnerable people, and step in before real harm can happen. It sounds sensible, doesn't it? It even sounds necessary. And the official goals are crystal clear. It's about safeguarding, not criminalizing. It's supposed to be about early, supportive help. But the crucial point, the one to really focus on, is that the stated goal is protection, not punishment. Remember that, because that single promise is the standard we have to measure every single action that follows. All right, so now let's move from the policy to the practice. We're going to dive into one specific case file where all those nice-sounding objectives of protection were put to the test. And, well, they were tested against a very different reality. Look at this timeline. It shows a really rapid and, as you'll see, a coordinated escalation. It all kicks off on March 31st, 2022. The subject of this case, who happens to be a decorated Army veteran, was assaulted, but then they were the one who was wrongfully arrested. That arrest created the first entry in a police record. Then, over the next few months, a whole string of neighbor complaints, all without a shred of evidence, get locked. By February of the next year, all that hearsay is used to get a closure order in court, which restricted access to their own home. And just 3 months after that, they were evicted, made homeless. A whole life just dismantled in a little over a year. So let's actually compare the official allegations side by side with the documented reality. On one side, they claimed antisocial behavior. The reality? A veteran was having PTSD triggers because their housing association failed to fix their broken front door for 5 months. On one side, complaints of noise and drugs. The reality? Zero evidence was ever produced in court. They framed this person as a threat to the community. The reality? This was a vulnerable individual, a veteran, who was in desperate need of the exact kind of support Operation Guardian was supposedly designed to provide. Now, you have to understand, this wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't one agency messing up. What happened here was the result of multiple agencies working together, not to protect someone, but to punish them. Their actions weren't just happening at the same time. They were linked. They were coordinated. This was a clear pattern of collusion. Let's just break down who did what. You had Surrey Police. Their job is to protect and serve. Instead, they built a legal case entirely on hearsay and then arrested the victim of an assault. Then you have MTH Housing. Their job is to provide a safe home. They use those same unproven reports to push for a quick eviction. And finally, Runnymede Council. They're responsible for community welfare. They jumped right in on the legal action without ever doing their duty to safeguard. You see how it works? Each agency just propped up the other's story. And this right here, this is the crucial point. This wasn't just a string of bad luck where things happened to line up. The moment Operation Guardian was activated, that was the catalyst. That's what gave these agencies the official green light to share unverified gossip, to build a completely flawed case, and to justify this coordinated punishing response. Once Op Guardian entered the picture, everything else followed. Now, I want to be very clear. These are not my assumptions. This is not speculation. The case files themselves, they reveal a clear pattern of prejudgment and, frankly, procedural abuse. Let's look at the evidence directly from the paper trail. Take a look at this. It's an internal note from the case file. It says, closure order should be supported, and then it says evidence pack underway. Think about that. The decision was already made. They decided on the outcome before they'd even finished putting the evidence together. From that moment on, a fair hearing was basically impossible. 0. That's the amount of evidence that could have helped the case that was ever disclosed in court. The police knew there was CCTV footage from that initial wrongful arrest, footage that the subject says would have proved their innocence. But that footage, it was never produced. It was never shown. And then you find this in the case file. It's a direct contradiction. An officer admitted on the phone that the individual wasn't fighting. But guess what? When it was time for the official court hearing, the language magically changed. The story was manipulated to fit the outcome they'd already decided on: eviction. So, what this all adds up to are serious legal breaches. The right to a fair hearing and a private life, right there in the Human Rights Act, were violated. The Equality Act was breached because they failed to make any reasonable adjustments for a known disability, PTSD. GDPR was breached by unlawfully sharing sensitive personal data. And police powers were clearly abused. This wasn't just a policy failure, it was a failure of the law. Looking at this one case forces you to ask a much, much bigger question. When a safeguarding operation ends up causing catastrophic harm to the person it's meant to protect, you have to ask, what is its real purpose? Is it actually about protection, or is it about control? And this really matters, because this isn't just a one-off risk. When you twist the language of safeguarding, it becomes a weapon. It creates a system where the most vulnerable people can be targeted with the full, coordinated power of the state. And in the process, they're stripped of their right to due process. You end up replacing real support with surveillance and actual protection with punishment. And what's terrifying is that it gives state agencies the power not just to fail to prevent harm, but to actively cause it, leaving people with no home, no support, and absolutely no justice. So, after all of this, we're left with a very stark reality. When a system that's designed for protection is used to make someone homeless, to silence a victim, and to completely ignore a disability, it hasn't just failed, it has betrayed its entire purpose. If this is what protection looks like, we are forced to ask, who is it really protecting?